raise of hands for everybody who's been into some sort of verbal altercation within the last couple weeks or foresees themselves getting into one, because it has been so much fire. Hello everybody, thank you guys so much for tuning in to today's Beach Live. We have a lot of things that we're going to cover. It has been a very interesting time, I would say, this time, and I think we'll just jump right in with what's been happening in the world, or at least what I have been recognizing with clients and with people and with myself, with Mars in retrograde in Aries. It's been very, very interesting. So, like, raise of hands for everybody who's been into some sort of verbal altercation within the last couple weeks or foresees themselves getting into one, because it has been so much fire in terms of like communication and talking to people, and also just like getting your point across and feeling heard and feeling seen, and you know, just people showing up for themselves in a really large way. And I actually usually almost always start my lives with a little bit of a view from the beach, so let me do that now. Da, 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 da. You can see how beautiful it is. You can see how pretty. Got a person in the background. So let's see. So where do we start with all of this energy and all of these transformations? So we have a Jupiter-Pluto conjunction, and I think I'll start with that because I think that's the thing that's like the most pertinent of what's happening. I mean, and we actually have three. We're actually kind of in the outer parts of the second one, and we'll have another one later on in the fall. The first one, I believe, was April 3rd. The second one was June 30th, which I still feel like we have some energy around. We just have these times, like really like this 6-month period, so to speak, where we're in this energy of uncovering the shadow, uncovering the things that were kept hidden, uncovering all of the things that we don't really necessarily want to talk about in our lives, and expanding it and putting it out there. A lot of it, I think, is connected with the coronavirus, because we do have a tendency, as we're looking at this particular transit, seeing like a spike. We saw the spike in cases in April. We see a spike now with the opening up, and you know, in the fall time around September, October, at least astrologically, what I'm thinking and what a lot of astrologers are thinking, there's going to be another kind of spike too in the fall. We're also going through like a very interesting time right now with our finances too, and the instability of that. And that is actually just what happens when we're kind of in a Pluto time period. That always has to do with like what they say, other people's money, and that can sometimes mean loans. So that could be your car loan, your house loan, things that you owe, taxes. We have that date coming up too, even though they extended it. So there's a lot of interesting things to do with our health, and also with our money and our stability in that sense. But there's two main things that I really wanted to talk about when we were talking about transformation, and I'm just looking at my notes because I always do. So since we have this period of time right now and it's pretty windy, so I hope you guys can hear me, and everything's going to be blowing all over the place, and I think we might have some clouds coming in. You guys can see a little bit. So today's an interesting day at the beach. I actually really love like these kind of like breezy, slightly rainy days at the beach. It's always nice because we always get pretty like sunny, consistent weather, especially this time of year. But it is hurricane season here in Hawaii, so sometimes, you know, if I get a little sprinkling, I might have to like tuck us underneath the tree somewhere. Right now I'm under a palm tree, but there's some like shower trees out there, so I might tuck us underneath there if it gets rainy, because I don't want my phone to get wet. But if not, we're all good. But what I wanted to talk about is really like our this transformation, which is happening for all of us in various different ways, and we're having a personal transformation, a transformation that's happening in our lives with the choices that we're making. Some people have lost their jobs. A lot of people I know, especially coming out of Venus retrograde, and we're out, you know, Venus went direct, but we're still in the shadow period where we're still seeing that. There's a lot of relationships things that are coming to the forefront that would be like relationships in our lives. That also could be relationships that we see in the world. So that could be like, you know, political relationships or partnerships that are falling apart. It could be, excuse me, like my eyes are watering because it's so windy, but I'm not crying. It's not my relationship. I'm single, so I'm all good. I'm protected from that. But really, Venus energy really isn't always about like romantic relationships. It can mean business partnerships. It also means romantic relationships. So we've seen the disintegration of a lot of those things, or at least okay, we need to do this a completely different way. That's one of the things that's been important. Some of it could be the relationship that we have with ourselves. Like maybe we were in a pattern of behavior that just isn't working for us. We've been maybe in denial of some inner truths, some things that we really needed to fix, especially if it has to do with these Plutonian things. And a lot of times when we talk about Pluto energy, we're talking about the things about ourselves that are things that are very deep and the things that are unseen. And we're also sometimes talking about addictive things. So it could be addictive patterning that we have. It can be addictive to substances. It can be addiction to food. It can be addiction to shopping or whatever. A lot of the things that we are not feeling very proud of and that we don't want people to necessarily know about. And sometimes we keep them hidden from everyone else, and more importantly, we keep them hidden from ourselves. So we're talking about transformation through in two different ways. Transformation through fire, since we have this elongated time right now where Mars is in Aries, and that transformation through fire is a transformation, because all transformation, you start with something and what you end with is totally different, right? So we understand what that means to transform in a way that doesn't feel good, and it doesn't necessarily feel good at the moment, but at the end of that transformation, we're like, you know what, that was really needed. And I feel like collectively we're all going through that. It never, for most people, unless you really get off on that, you have like sadistic tendencies, you know. I mean, some people, I think maybe when you've been through it enough times, you have like a healthier view. You might say, okay, you know what, this feels like this is a transformative time for me, so I'm going to move into that. But for most of us, we kind of kick and scream when it comes to the transformation. It's not a fun time. It means that the pattern, because we're such a patternistic type of people, we love to, you know, predict what's going to happen, and we love kind of our routines. When transformation or Plutonian energy comes in there, it tells us that our routines are we're changing up the routine. We're not going to be doing things the way that we used to, and the end goal that you used to have all the time might not be that. You're actually going into an unknown place, and you're going to come out different, and we don't know how you're going to come out, but you're going to be, it's supposed to be what, you know, what the path that you take, that's the path that you're supposed to be on. So it puts you in this place of insecurity, deep insecurity with this, because you're not sure, you know, what's going to happen in the end. And I think for a lot of people, that's a really hard place to be in. And a lot of times when we're in that place, we get really judgmental. We can be really angry at the systems that are putting us in this place of uncomfortability, and we want to fight back against that. And sometimes we have to ask ourselves, like, what are the times where we hold on to the things that we hold dear? Because also remember too, our sun is in Cancer, and one of the things that Cancer does or represents in our lives is home and tradition. So here we are uncovering uncomfortable truths with a whole lot of transformative fire energy in the place where we're supposed to feel most comfort in the things that we do every day. So it's kind of like a huge transition in your home. And I'll give you guys an example. It reminds me of when I went off to college. I went to college not too far from where I grew up. But in college, I met a lot of different people that challenged my traditional belief in things. You know, I went into college with an idea of this is how people are, this is the religion that I prescribe to, this is how I live my life, this is what a good person looks like. And I had a lot of pushback in that when I was in college, because it opened up my life to lots of different people, lots of different cultures, lots of different religions, lots of different ways of doing things. And so being the type of person I am, and because I also have just like a lot of ninth house energy, and I love like whatever, I'm a xenophilic person. I love actually everything that's different. I'm never afraid of the difference. I'm always really interested in finding out more information. So as I found out more information, a lot of the things that I considered to be like maybe my core values that I grew up with changed. That's fine, because I was kind of in an isolated situation, and I was just there with peers, and we're all kind of changing, and we're all kind of learning together. Come the holiday season, you know, and I go back home to visit family, and I'm staying with them, and I'm like, these are all my new ideas, and this is the way that I think about things, and I've dropped this, and I've picked up this, and I think this is cool, and you know how you think this is wrong? Well, I think it's totally fine, and like you're families literally falling apart. I came from a little bit more of a conservative family, so they were like, what the fuck, you know? And so trying to make those changes, like when you're going off on your own and you're transforming and those things are happening, that's like some powerful energy. But then you take it back to that family system, or that system where this is how we do things, this is how we work, this is how we think, and you're trying to like kind of upend that structure. That can be a very painful process. So we can see that like happening in our personal lives, and we definitely right now see that happening in our systemic structures right now, specifically when we're talking about things in terms of Black Lives Matter, in terms of the way that we want to move together as a country, politically, like what our views are about that, what our views are about American history, what our views are about how we treat other, which is everybody that's not the majority in this country. So we're seeing that we're having all of these like systemic, you know, changes individually in our lives, and also in a larger sense, in a whole. So I think that's just really interesting to know that, like, I always believe this little thing, as within, as without, as above, as below. And so whatever's happening within us in our own individual lives, we can actually see those things happening as well on the outside. So it's just mirroring. It's constantly happening for us. And so in that sense, you should feel not alone in your changes and not alone in the things that's happening with you, because it's really collectively happening to us in a lot of different ways. So let's see. The other thing that I wanted to talk about was how transformation, especially when you're working out things, how that can actually be for your benefit when you're kind of clashing and when you're having those arguments. Because we're going to have them. You know, Mars is in Aries. That's just what's happening. Like these easy conversations that we really hope to have, that we want to have, that we're trying to have, you know, sometimes are going to be a bit explosive. I, for one, have seen I live on this really interesting corner right now where my condo is, and I always say, like, this street, it's not cursed, but it definitely, we get a lot of energy, and on full moon times, like somebody's screaming, somebody's arguing, lots of domestic violence, a lot of couples arguing, families arguing. I've just heard neighbors who I've heard always argue, their arguments are a little bit larger, and I've also just people that I've never heard arguing, like I'm driving by and people are like, ah, you know, and that is just this time, and it doesn't feel good, because we all want to have like that kind of heart-centered moment where people are coming together, connected, and they love each other, and they're, you know, together in this place. But that's actually not the energy that we're dealing with right now. We're dealing with people kind of coming in a much more aggressive way to each other, and you might also feel that way too. And I think, you know, one of the things to think about when you have all of that fire and you have all of that aggressive information, you're trying to get your point across, or you're trying to change things, or you're trying to change things within yourself, is to really just take a moment and make sure that what you're putting out there, because we're in this culture right now of cancel culture, calling people out. There's been this new term that's come in that talks about calling people in. You know, the big call out is, you know, blasting somebody. We're going to blast so-and-so. We're going to tell everybody like what you're doing and uncover stuff. And we're going to cancel you because we're in this cancel culture thing. And so this new term, which I kind of like, which is called calling people in, which is maybe taking a moment to talk to the person individually, taking the moment to, you know, not necessarily always making it so public, and telling a person like, okay, this is what we think is wrong with your idea or with what you're doing, A, B, C, and D, and this is what I think you can do to change it, instead of like using shame as a way, and I'm doing a video on shame. It's one of the emotions, the kind of untouchable emotions that we don't like to talk about. I believe personally that shame can be used in really positive ways. We just have to know. Like, shame is one of the things that keeps us from doing a lot of things that we would later regret. So we definitely can use that. So using shame in a way of saying, like, you know, in terms of not like, shame on you, you're so horrible, look at this, like your highest self, how you esteem yourself, how you want yourself, what you're saying, what you're doing is not aligning with that. And I think that's a really powerful point, because you're not comparing a person to the world or comparing them to yourself or whatever. You're comparing them to who their highest self would be. Like, these are the things that you say. These are the things that you put out. You say that you're this person. This is how I view you. And the things that you're doing or the things that you're saying is not really living up to that, and they're not coinciding. And I want to call in, or I want to dial in, and I just want to check in and see like what's going on. Like, what's the issue? Why are these things happening? So I think you'll get a better response from people when you call in than when you call out and you make it public. I do think that there are some people that are in positions where they're a public position, so calling someone out who is in a public position, that makes sense because they have like so many followers, or they're in charge of this state or the country or whatever, or this organization, and you can see that they're involved in something that is detrimental and that can hurt people. Then definitely saying we're calling you out on this in a public platform because you're a public person, that makes more sense. But I'm talking about our interpersonal relationships, calling in, contacting directly, putting in a call, shooting off a text. I always think that calls are the best, or some kind. I know we can't always be in person right now, so even if it's just a Skype conversation, as opposed to kind of like blasting our friends, that might not be something that we want to do, because when we do have that kind of fiery, like intense energy, sometimes it can result in a massive change in someone, especially when a lot of it's coming down the pike. But sometimes, depending on the type of person it is, it can result in an equal pushback, an equal fire right back at you, and then it just ends up being like a volleying of two pieces of coal going back and forth, burning both of your hands. And that's not something that will always create the type of change you want. So you have to think about, when you're calling someone out or in, what is the change that I want to see? What is the end result? So if you start with the end and then you work back, then I think that everything you do and everything you say will just be more effective, because that's what we're really looking for, right? We're looking to be effective in our words so that we can invoke the change, or at least get somebody to think differently. Because a lot of this is about, changing the way that people think. And we're talking about fundamental ways that people think. Fundamental ways that people think, the ways that they were taught to think by their family, by society, and all of those things. And when you're going into people's core belief systems, which are all wrapped up into how they feel about themselves, that's like the place of the unknown. That's like a dark place. It can be for some people. So how you address somebody and how you create change is really through that individual connection, not necessarily through blasting, shaming, and making fun of and things like that. That just causes people to just like harden themselves. It reminds me of a lot of there was this section in the Bible, in the Old Testament, that talked about it was Pharaoh, right? And there's that section that talked about and Pharaoh hardened his heart every time. I think it was Moses, right? Moses and Aaron, because Aaron was the mouthpiece. So, all of these tribulations or things were happening, in this Old Testament story, and you had Pharaoh constantly, every time it was like the locust or it was famine or whatever, it said that God actually, which is very interesting, hardened his heart. And then so he still wasn't able to kind of believe, because that was the whole point. The whole point was to believe in the Jewish God, and then to let people go and let them to their freedom. And that was just something that Pharaoh, throughout all the different trials, was not able to do. And we want to, take this particular story or this myth and look at how that affects us in our lives. Like, am I hardening my heart just to be a dick? I gotta call it as I see it. Are we doing that? Are we just hardening just because someone called us out and it's a little embarrassing, and we don't want to own up to it, so we're like, whatever, that's not me, that's somebody else. Well, look, I don't do that. Well, look at you do that. When we start getting into that energy, we know what that energy feels like, because it starts to rise up. It starts to feel like this, and there's a lot of this, and there's a lot of constriction. When you're starting to feel that way, usually that's defensiveness. Usually maybe you could take a step back. It's also okay to be like, you know what, I don't want to talk about this anymore. Let me go and chew on this, and I'll get back with you. And then you chew on it and say, okay, maybe that's something I need to change, and then you adjust. Let's see. The other thing I wanted to talk about was, so we talked about essentially transformation through conflict, which is something that we're going to see happening. I want to talk now about transformation through building community, and that would be more so the Jupiter influence, transforming yourself through information, through connecting to your spirituality, connecting to a spiritual community, connecting to a spiritual practice, connecting to yourself, connecting yourself through ritual. There is ways that transformation can happen that's not necessarily so fiery. And I think when we think about this Jupiter-Pluto conjunction and how that's adjusting things for us, that's one of the things that I'm thinking about. That would be my preferable way. I'm not always one that loves to be in the hot seat, even though I have a lot of fire energy in my chart. Transforming myself through personal work and self-knowledge, for me, tends to be a more long-lasting transformation. because I took the time to research things for myself. I took the time to open my mind. I took the time to be quiet and take a moment and take in the information that I have. You know, there is this, reminds me of the tarot, and I'm going to pull out my tarot cards because I had some cards associated with this. We talked about this before. It reminds me of Hermit energy, which is Virgo energy. And Hermit, let's see if I have him here. So Hermit energy is all about taking the light inside and shining it. And when you're inside, in your heart, in your mind, you're shining the light in there, because he's in, essentially, oh, here he is. He's in a cave with the light. He looks like Gandalf. And these are images that we're going to continue to come back through, because these are important images. So when you're taking the light inside and you're shining it on yourself, and you're shining it on how you think, and you're shining it on how you feel in your heart, and how you feel about people, and how you feel about things, you're actually like taking your inner light inward and really looking in there. You're taking an assessment on what you have in your heart and the way that you think, and then you're thinking about how you can apply that in your life. So that has to do with a lot of personal work that you need to do for yourself, which I think is something that is everybody's responsibility. We can't really change a lot of things in life because we are a community and it's a collective, and there's so many different moving parts. I mean, we can change things. Obviously, we can see that. We can come together and create change, but a lot of times that change starts from within. And for me, that's what I'm most interested in. I'm most interested in getting people to look into themselves, so that when we do work as a community and we work as groups, we have done the work ourselves, so that when problems come up in groups, which they will, because we're humans and because we all want different things and we all see different outcomes, we can work better together, so that when someone does the call out, like we were talking about earlier, or call, or the dial in, or the call in to you, you're not coming from this place of defensiveness, and I don't want to take it, I don't want to do it. You're actually coming from a place where you can either take what they said and take that lantern inside and say, is this true? You know, is there something about what was said to me that's truthful? Where I find this to be incredibly important is in relationships. Specifically love relationships, because family starts out of that, and then outside of family we have community, right? So I think it's very important that we do that personal work before we start getting into love relationships, and relationships that can last a lifetime, that we start to, invite children into, and all of these other things. We need to make sure that we have that personal work done, because if we don't have the personal work done, then we're just stepping into relationships essentially expecting our partner to fix us, expecting our partner to overlook the things that we haven't even within ourselves, come to terms with. And so when somebody brings up something that is not fun, or a habit or a tendency or a need that they have that they feel isn't being filled, it's totally triggering all of the core wounds that you have, and we talked about that in the previous video. Those wounds from childhood, those wounds from things that were said to you, wounds for neglect and all of that. When somebody's triggering all of those things, we're not able to really look at it from a real place of truth, because we haven't done the personal work. I believe before we can go out and do big, great work in the world, doing the personal work is important. Having that moment of really looking into ourselves, having that connection to something that allows us to know that we're not alone. For a lot of people, that connection can be to nature. For me, it's huge. That's why I do a beach live. I love connecting to nature. It makes me feel like that it's not all about me, that I'm not necessarily the most important person, that there are other people in the world that are more important or just as important. I'm connecting to my inner self. I'm connecting to nature. I'm connecting to everybody else. So that's another connection. Some people connect to a belief system. So for some people that looks like traditional religion, which is the religions that I'm sure a lot of us have grown up with. For some people, it's a connection to spirituality. So it could be something like a nature or something like another philosophy kind of thought that isn't like a deity-based type of thing. But what we're talking about is just connecting to something that's larger than yourself. I think allows you to kind of move away a little bit from the ego, so that you're looking at things as a whole. And I think a lot of times when you're able to do that, you're able to, when you come up against your shadow, or someone else presents the shadow to you, like, look at what happened, you know, this is what's going on, this is hurting me or whatever, you're able to kind of deal with it in a more holistic way, as opposed to, like, you know, having those core wounds triggered and then having all of the things that can happen, which could be denial or hurting someone back or moving away and withdrawing, and all the different things that we do when we kind of haven't dealt with those core wounds. So in thinking about transformation, since this is essentially what this whole video, you know, is about, and hey, hello to everybody who's joining. I see some folks are joining, and you guys, I of course will post this on the stories, not the story, the IGTV, so that you can look at this from the very beginning if you choose to. And but I think it's really important that we're going within and we're doing our expansive work, that we're looking at ourselves as a friend. I find that is another thing that's really helpful. I actually have a quote about that. It says, well, I don't know if this is a quote or something that I read, but I don't remember who it's from. I think I read it in a magazine, but it said, all the advice you ever give is for you. And I thought, like, sorry, my eyes are super watering because it's so windy. My eyes always water when it's windy. I have sensitive eyes. So all the advice you ever give is for you. And I thought, like, that is so fucking awesome, because if you're the type of person that that friends, you know, go to and they value your advice, and I've always been that person in my life and in people's lives and in my family's lives. Like, I have always, from a very young age, been a little bit of a sage, you know, somebody who people would come to with you know, like, what do you think about this, or let's bounce some ideas off of you. And so with that being said, if we think about the advice we give other people, I think that it's an amazing thing to think about how that advice is actually applicable in our lives and how we can actually use that. And whenever I personally come up against something that is like, I don't see a way out, or I'm having some real negative feelings, like, I know the transformation is coming, because I know how things go in my life. I have a very specific way that things come to me and things are, and this is something that just from my journaling practice and my own personal spiritual practice, when transformation is coming, I can kind of smell it. I know, I'm like, oh boy, here we go. You know, like, okay, I'm ready for it. Like, you know, I'm gonna take this, I'm not gonna freak out. And one of the things that happens sometimes, though, is I don't see what the answer is immediately, because I had my heart set on a goal, or I had my heart set on one thing, and that's just not materializing, and it's not manifesting for me, and I get really freaked out about it. And so one of the things that I did in my journaling practice is I said, okay, if I wasn't me, and if I was somebody else, and I had this exact same problem, and I wrote it, you know, and I said, okay, like, what would I do? I actually gave myself advice as if it wasn't myself. So it's a hard thing to do. You don't want to, like, necessarily do it, like, verbally, unless that, you know, you can do that. But what I did was I wrote down what the problem was and the questions that I had. And then I took some time away. I went back to it and I read it as if a friend told me. And I even assigned it to a friend, like a friend who would have a problem like that. And I'm like, so if so-and-so came to me and they said they had all of these issues, what would I say? Because I feel like I always am able to show up with somebody in terms of giving them advice, or having them look at it a different way, or giving them tools or something. Like, that's always been a strong point, and I know that. And I've always been so frustrated as to why I couldn't use that for myself. So with this particular practice of asking yourself as if you're someone else, I did. And then I wrote down all of the things that I would tell them. I wrote down all of the suggestions that I would give. I wrote down all of the things that they should do. And then I did that. And that was really, really powerful. The first time I did that was about 4 years ago. And so now when I come up against something where I'm just like, yeah, you know, it doesn't happen often, but it happens, you know, it happens. It still really happens. Most of the time when things are bumpy, I'm like, okay, there's a shift, there's something, and I can kind of sort of flow with it. But sometimes things are just bumpy, and I'm like, where the fuck did this come from? Like, none of this makes sense. This isn't anything like how I thought it was going to be. That's when I'm able to, you know, go into that work and use that. So I find that to be incredibly helpful. So that's just another tool also that you can use to kind of help you navigate the difficult time of transitioning, which is not always feeling the best, but, you know, it is something I feel like that we're in constant motion, right? We're in constant flux. And so it's important for us to always be in the flow of that. There are times where we need to kind of root in. I remember my hula halal teacher used to always say, she had this really beautiful I'll tell a story because I love stories. So she had said one time the halal was Pa'ua Ahi'iaka, I believe was the name of my old halal. It was such a long time ago that I danced hula. I really want to get back into it, but it's been so long. So anyway, they went to the city, right? They went to New York, and they were doing this big like cultural dance, and so they had like lots of different people from all over different ethnicities, and they were coming and they were like dancing and sharing, you know, their ancestral dance. And so this hula halal was there, and they were dancing, and so they had like like German ballerinas there, and they had like African dance, and they had like all kinds of different dance from all over the world, traditional dance, and also like some dance that we would consider more like American-based dance. But it was basically like a sharing of a dance and a sharing of culture. And so she was saying that, and I think it was her halal with like another halal went to New York, and she was mentioning that when the ballerinas came on, they were dancing, and you know, they were all like super tall and very lithe and all of that. And a couple of the girls had mentioned like, oh, you know, like, oh, look at how their bodies move, and they're so like, you know, like they're so flexible, and you know, it was just talking about like the nature of of ballet. And she had mentioned to them that that there was a difference between bamboo, which would be more like what the ballerinas were, because bamboo, you know, is really tall and it's very flexible. If you've ever been in a bamboo forest, you hear like them clinking together. It's so beautiful. There's a bamboo forest on Maui that's like amazing. It's my favorite. I used to walk through. It was so gorgeous. But you see bamboo swaying and like, you know, hitting against each other, making these beautiful sounds. And a lot of people have like wind chimes that are bamboo and stuff. And so you have the idea of this almost like a palm tree, like you're swaying and you're able to kind of sort of move in the wind. And that's an energy, and that's a style of dance. But she was saying that we are like koa, which is a strong wood. It's the wood that you make like canoe out of. It's like you build things with this strong wood. And so you have these two energies. There's not one energy that's better than the other energy, and you actually need both. And so I think a lot of bamboo or palm tree and koa in life, like when are the times in life that we need to be like bamboo, where we need to have this flexibility, where we need to move, where we need to kind of sort of bounce off each other, and when are the times that we need to be like koa, where we need to be big and we need to be strong and we need to like have things be able to like we're the actual ones that's supporting something, and those are energies that we're constantly going through, you know, in our lives. And let's see, what was the last thing before I close out, because I'm going to close out today and jump in the water. My foot is falling asleep. I think the last thing that I wanted to really close with today, let's see. Oh yeah, okay. So I have a quote. I have another quote. I found some really cute quotes that I really like, and this one's like a really pretty one. Well, pretty quote, but it's a beautiful quote. I guess I look at words. Words are beautiful to me, so I see words. Words take on colors and shapes to me. I don't know if it makes me. There's a type of people that like they actually like if they see music or like words, they can hear words like or words are like music. So there's I think it's called synesthology. I don't know what the word is. I will post it later what that word is when I upload this. But sometimes I feel like I'm that way because like certain things I can see them or I can smell them or I can I interpret them in a different way, and maybe that's just because I'm a creative. I am a writer and an actor and so forth. But anyway, with that being said, this quote was very special to me, and I am probably totally bollocksing up this woman's name, but I did want to give her name because I think that's important to let people know. Her name is Nayyirah, I think, Waheed, and that's Nayyirahwaheed. And so her quote is, "If someone doesn't want me, it's not the end of the world. If I don't want me, the world is nothing but endings." And wow, right? When we don't choose ourselves first, then it does feel like we are fully dependent on what everybody thinks and how everybody else loves us. And there's so much power in choosing yourself and in loving yourself first. There's something actually too that's really attractive about that too. So when you're choosing yourself and you're loving yourself and you're in this place of feeling like content with yourself, then that becomes incredibly attractive to healthy people. They will see that and be drawn to that. Healthy friends, healthy relationships, healthy business partners, healthy neighbors, healthy people in your life, And I think it's just very important day after day that we're constantly choosing ourselves, we're loving ourselves despite all of the things about ourselves that we might not like, despite the things about ourselves that we feel ashamed of, despite how we grew up, despite our core wounds, despite our weaknesses, despite the things that nobody knows that if they did, it would be horrific. Despite all of those things, we're still choosing to love ourselves, and know that at any point, no matter even if you did something that you don't feel proud of, because I think a lot of times we talk, because of right now, there's a lot of talk, because we're dealing with core wounds and Pluto, about like victimhood and victims, people who have had things done to them. And our heart goes out to all of those, myself included. We all have been victimized by something. There's also a very important thing about people who have done the hurting, who then after that have made a change or want to make a change and can't get out of the mode of feeling like I'm the perpetrator and I can never forgive myself. And that can cause people to victimize themselves and then possibly continue in that behavior. So if you are a person who has done something that you feel has not been appropriate, that you feel has hurt somebody, it is up to you to make amends with that, for you to admit that for yourself, for you to get some help and healing with that, and for you to see if you can, if it's possible, if it's appropriate, to make amends for what you've done, so you can get that monkey off your back and start feeling good about yourself. And because when you start in that, then you're going to be able to move on and make better choices. When we feel shitty about ourselves, we think shitty and we do shitty, and that's kind of sort of the way that it is. And they're totally interconnected, and how we navigate the two is very different. Some people believe that if you think differently, then you're going to do differently. So you start with your thoughts. Some people are action people, so they have to do the different thing, then they think differently, and then that becomes the cycle. There is not one that's better than the other, even though there's a lot of philosophies. It really just has to do with if you're a person that's kind of more body-centered, meaning like you actually put your body in it, and it's through the doing, it's through the action that changes your thinking. Or if you're the kind of person who's a little bit more of a ruminator, or who thinks about things and it has to change in your mind first, and then after it's changed in your mind, then you can put your body and your actions to it. And some of us are both, and some of us are more one than the other. But whatever that is, those are two things that can help you achieve that transition and that transformation that you want. So thank you guys so much for joining this live today. I feel like I was very scattered and everything, but that's just my mind right now. Mercury is direct, but we're still in the shadows, so sometimes during Mercury retrograde I have an interesting way of communicating, but I feel that you guys understand what I'm saying. And I think that these kind of things are things that really deeply need to be said and talked about. And I think like my encouragement is to go out and share this conversation, whether you share the video, which would be fantastic, or tag people in the video, which would be fantastic. But if that's not what you do, talk to somebody about it. Talk to people about transformation, about their shadows, how things are transforming for them, what's happening, you know, what they see their future is like. Totally go ahead and do that, because that's really, really important. It's important that we talk about these things, right? We shouldn't just keep these things, you know, when we keep things in the dark, they grow. Why should we be surprised? That's exactly how seeds grow, right? In the dark, buried. You know, that's how we grow things. So if we want to grow the positive things, right, all of that, we want to grow plants and vegetables and fruit trees because those are delicious. We're not really trying to grow things that are not so great, right? We're not trying to grow hate. We're not trying to grow bigotry. We're not trying to grow low self-esteem. Those are things we don't want to grow. So we need to shine light on those things so that then we can push those things down, and we're growing the things that we really want to grow. So thank you guys again for joining. My name is Kaylani. This is the Wild Wahine. If you're coming into this video a little bit later, which I know some of you guys are, I'm going to upload it on the IGTV so you can watch it from the beginning. And you know, if you feel like there's somebody in your life that could benefit from this, please tag or please share. And thank you guys so much for joining. As I do with all of my videos, I always end with a beautiful picture of the ocean because it is a beach live. And overcast days at the beach, I love them. So This is a beautiful overcast day at the beach. Sometimes it's nice to not get like bombarded with the sun, even though I love the sun and I'm a sun baby, and we're about to go into Leo, so that's going to be like super fun times. But thank you guys so much for joining in today, and I will, yay! Thank you so much, Capture Imagery. Yes, thank you guys for joining. Watch this video from the beginning when I upload it, and have a wonderful week, and I will see you guys next week. Bye!